Before we start the meeting, we have an apology, apologies from the chairman. For that reason, we need to appoint a chairman for the meeting, and I need a proposition so to do.
If I can, I'd like to nominate myself for as council president.
Thank you. I need a seconder. Thank you very much. Based on that, here we go from the same as last year, we're over there. Right, back to the agenda as it stands. Have in front of me the minutes, the requirement for me to sign the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 3rd of July 2014. Are you happy that we accept that and I sign the minutes as being a true record of what took place on that night, if you can remember what it was?
I am and I do.
Good. It sounds like he's getting married. I am and I do. Item 2 is the apologies.
We've already had apologies from Councillor Diana Osborne and also from Nick Booten.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 3, declarations of members' interests. To receive declarations of members' disclosable interests and the nature of such interests in any of the following agenda items. Do I have any declarations of members' interests already involved?
No.
Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to item 4, annual review of standards of conduct and complaints handling. Simon?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to give you a fairly full report, given it's the only meeting of the year, and it is the committee that essentially steers the promotion of high standards of conduct for the council, and in our case we also like to do that for the parish and district councils. This year you've got a suite of resolved items that you can agree to, suggest, and recommend an item to go on to council, which I deal with as it goes through the report. Tradition is, and it seems to be what people prefer, is I go through sections. By all means, if you have questions, I'm quite happy to take it on the fly. There's quite a bit of material. As you are that committee that does that annual review, it's good for you to hear of the trends as well as what I put in words, and I might be able to embellish at times without revealing too much information or certainly not personal data. We can do that in a meeting like this. But also it's about indicating what we need to do for the future. And some of those recommendations pick up about development sessions and the like. Okay. So this is what amounts to under our constitution, our annual report for council on work and performance. So you have that key point, as I say. And overall, if I give you my overall impression of conduct in the district, I think the overall impression is that there is a good standard of conduct in the district. One or two issues, as always, but overall it's good. It's certainly good in the district council, and it's good in the parishes and the town council. I always split the two because, to be fair to the parishes and the town councils, they don't have the resource behind them to actually assist them as much as the district council does, for example. So they don't have their own monitoring officer, they don't have their own standards officers or any other officers beyond one or two key positions. So I'm always carrying that. So I have that degree of, if you like, empathy with clerks, particularly trying to discharge some of the roles in promoting good conduct in their parishes and town council. One of the things you've not had this year is any hearing panels. Obviously, as a committee, you can constitute those, but you've not had any. I think that's a good thing. I think that reflects good levels of conduct. Who knows whether we'll get lost next year. One of those things you can do. But they can be established, and they can also be established for appeals by council employees. And again, you've not had any this year. And that would involve basically the members of the council in that process rather than members, not the members of the parish members. And one thing I always put in the report, because I'm conscious that some people outside this room do actually read this and do want to take up some early points, if you like, but parish meetings are not subject to the provisions of the local and aspect of code of conduct. But because it's public office, they do have the learning principles to be guided by. One of the issues I find in handling of inquiries and complaints is people assuming that the standards, so the principles, the known principles, are incorporated into code of conduct automatically. They're the basis for how you behave, and they're the basis for code of conduct. But parish meters don't have to have that code of conduct. In terms of background, there haven't been any national changes to the standards regime, certainly not of any consequence. There is what's called the Committee for Standards in Public Life, which some of you will be familiar with, and they continue to monitor, and they are a bit concerned about the lack of teeth, essentially, in terms of sanctions available when there is something seriously awry, seriously straight. And there have been 1 or 2 cases nationally to that effect. In our local context, I'm pleased that we've got 95% now of town and parish councils abiding by the DDC type code. I say type is actually a replica of the DDC code, in large part of one amendment we did last year for some. But 95% is good, and that gives me an easy job. It also helps the committee, I suggest, to promote a common approach for most of the parish councils around. And even where they've got a code based on the NALC version, it's not horrendously difficult or different for us to worry about when it comes to complaint handling in particular. Although I've not had any to deal with in respect to those parish councils to date. When we go about promoting, our approach as a committee, and my approach, is to try and prevent things, to try and nip things in the bud. You don't want to have cases coming forward, you want to try and help people to try and perform their duties. We all know as members how hard it is for performing duties and the flack you get. And independent persons and members will probably appreciate it as well. The spotlight comes on. But I try to assist, I take the committee's cue for trying to assist, and particularly members and clerks from the parishes. That's where I get most of the queries. But I'm quite happy to get that, and I want to get that. I'd rather have that ability to nip things in the bud, as I say, or generally give some advice. I've identified that the main topics that have come through to me on the inquiry front have been on disclosure of interests, and that's been a recurring theme over the years, but also what constitutes predisposition and predetermination. I would suggest as well, it's not because people don't necessarily know what to do, but they just want to be cautious. And one of the things I've had to do is actually say, you can actually take part. Just because you've said something before doesn't mean to say you're automatically barred from saying something again. It's how you've said it before, or what you actually believe in your head. But caution is, if you like, a consequence of a standards regime, and actually you still want to have councils empowered to do what they've been elected to do. So always have that balance in mind. But those have been common queries. We've had some new councils this year, obviously district councils, you're aware, and some are brand new and some are re-elected, as it were. Of the brand new ones, all of those have had induction training from myself, and most of the others have as well. One in particular hasn't, but that's fine, because I'm pretty sure that person is aware of what's required. It wasn't that long ago they were on the council, so I'm not worried about that. As always, the onus is on the member to comply with the code of conduct, so they know the obligations, I'm sure of that. But the new council's guided, and I always think it's good to give information to new councils in induction. But as part of the induction, if you like, of any new councils across the district, one of the things that was also done was giving guidance to clerks. So when they got new parish councillors, because they would have had some parish councillors come in, getting them to remind the new members of their need to register interest, for example. They wouldn't have got training per se, unless the clerk can arrange something, but in terms of complying with the requirements of the Act, registering interest and the like, yes, they've had guidance from myself on that front as well. I've continued to work with NCALC. I have a good rapport with the Chief Executive of NCALC, Danny Moody, and I try to signpost the parishes to NCALC if need be, and try to keep that family, if you like, going. And 100% of councils in this district are signed up to NCALC, so it's a good resource, I think. Had a learning and development session last year for members. Again, interest featured in that. We utilised Simon Early district law. It's very good. We used it for planning committees, for example, as well. It's very used to the theme of interest because it can often come up in a planning arena. But we had that session, and you'll see in the advice that I'm recommending to do that kind of event again. Covering different topics, and I will explain these a little bit later. But that was done, and then we also do their version of training for parish and town councils. The frequency is not as much as it used to be, but they do occasional sessions. The one I'm thinking about is to particularly deal with disclosing interest and that avoiding predetermination point. So I think I'll particularly focus on that. So I'm asking you to support that. But in any such session, you tend to venture over the whole gambit of the company. That's how it could be natural gambit. I have no problem with that. At that session last time, I made reference to the front page of the Dorset Echo. Graham, you may be aware of it as well. I've shown that to you in advance, where the leader was taken to court for not having disclosed interest. And at that time, the headline was about something along the lines of council leader going to court. Front page, Dorset Echo. Since then, the leader was actually prosecuted for one of the charges and was given a conditional discharge, which is the lowest punishment in court. But once again, it's in the media, in the front pages. It's a party disciplining vote. He is not part of the party, or he's certainly not leader of the party. And it's the media impact, the reputation impact, which is perhaps the biggest sanction, which is not written anywhere in the legislation, for example. So, in fact, guidance, you can see. But that's the real consequence, if you like, for the members, is to be accused of something. It's bad enough. Then to have it proven, it doesn't matter how minimal the sanction is, conditional discharge being at least, it's still you've been prosecuted. That's what the public remember.
It's interesting on the side. After the last hearing we had here, the result that came out of that was effectively the reputation damage was far more, potentially more damaging than anything else that the committee as such could ever impose.
Correct. So I like to use those illustrations to make it real for people. That seems to me like it did catch the attention of the last training session for sure. But they're rare. I don't want to paint a picture of this happening everywhere. It's not at all. It doesn't happen on other streets so far. Mystery shopping. We've deployed a couple of members of our committee to do mystery shopping. These are the non-DVC members of the committee. And I've highlighted on the following page, on page 40, I've highlighted those two cases, those two shops that were visited, two parish councils. And the text on that page is actually primarily from the mystery shopper, so the member. So I've paraphrased it if you know, but it's largely the language. The first case, passion in planning is the phrase I'll pick out from the paragraph. That seems to be a common place for me to get complaints. Common area of inquiries as well is to, I've got a plan and application coming up on our chain, what do I do with respect to I live next door, I live far away, whatever it is. And we'd heard some things about this particular parish council, good to go and check. And in this case, yeah, you can see the language of an angry affair. Parish members will recognise this kind of thing goes on. But this one was a particular angry affair. But whilst there was some questioning of the integrity of one of the members, there wasn't anything that I could actually use from the mystery shop to reinforce the message to the clerk, particularly rather than the member who goes to the clerk. So, okay, it was useful. It's always good to get a sense of what's happening out there and what passion can be. The second one was where there were some issues raised with us, where it appeared to be a council of somewhat disarray. However, you see there the meeting was very relaxed and open, the chairman was conducting business very well. A member had tried to get out, had declared interest, but we physically couldn't get out in time. Procedurally, they should have allowed him enough time perhaps to go in the room. So you couldn't really necessarily fault the member for not running it, but perhaps procedurally they could have said, okay, we'll just wait for, this is what we do at District Council, for example, just wait for so-and-so to be in the room. However, the main point was it contrasted some of the allegations that I've been getting. That was a one-off though, so there can be other times when it's not so friendly. But that context is useful to try to target assistance. Okay, but every time we have this, and in future, for every case we have, the intention is trying to be promotional, proactive, trying to get things sorted before they become an issue. So I do like mystery shoppers, and again, I'm recommending that you continue with that practice. I think that's a sensible thing. Am I right to think, if I may, Chairman, just ask Graham, am I right to think Southall Towns might do a similar thing? Do you know? They don't? Oh, right, okay. So we found that beneficial. Codes of conduct, I'll just turn to the codes of conduct then. December 2014 is when we had the update, and we absolutely clarified that it was about the code applies when the members acting in their official capacity. And I reported last time, in December, sorry, that I've been to an event, a national event, and I took the liberty of having a conversation with one of the presenters and put to our position, which we had the old language of acting in the capacity of, or claiming to act or giving the impression of acting. And he said, yeah, there's an arguable point here. The law says acting in. Yes, you can interpret that in a certain way, but if I was you on balance, I'd probably take it out. So on balance, we took it out. And that's what December Council did. And that updated code was supplied to all of those councils that have adopted the same code. And I've got confirmation that quite a few of them have adopted that changed code, but I still need confirmation of others. But if they don't, that's for them to choose. What will happen in practice is if they do, someone does complain and say it doesn't comply with the parish's code because they were given the impression of acting in the capacity of a councillor, I would just not accept it essentially as a complaint. I would take it forward. Okay. In the appendix to the report is the code of conduct with a couple of track changes. And I highlight the text here on page 15 about some minor updates. So police authorities default is now police crime panel. That's now to be incorporated. And I've said that because there's not been any significant change nationally, there's no need to revisit the code. But I did have a query from one case, parish council case. They've got a light code, and there's a section in the code, which I track changed, there's a section in the code about where you can make representations, notwithstanding you've got a disclosable interest. Now, the narrow reading would have been, well, actually, that's contrary to the Act, where you cannot make such representations in respect of peculiar interests. My point was about, in respect of the other disclosable interests, and the classic case I will give you, as I gave to that member, is, well, under the Code of Conduct, there's this category of other disclosable interests, which could be, when it applies to you, it affects your well-being more than it affects a member of the public, it might affect your judgment of public interest. For example, Islam material. It actually might be fair for you to have your say. That would be a classic disposition, deployment of this provision. But because it's caused a little bit of doubt, only one case to be fair, but it has caused a little bit of doubt, okay, let's clarify. So I suggested some words to that effect in the code. And it's that change in particular that requires the recommendation of the council. It's the committee itself that will be able to agree to that. But it's about the right to fair hearing. That's the point of that particular insert. So it will be called the July 2015 version because the council's meet till 30th of July. There's no need to change what the district council has or the supplementary codes. We don't need to change those. Parishes don't necessarily have those. We don't know any parish actually that has got those supplementary codes which do with licensing, housing, planning, and use of hospitality. I've touched on it already, but one of the key features that comes through is interests and the inquiries I get, and that's not unusual. People are registering their interests from what I can see. Certainly in the district they are registering their interests and they are updating them. And I'm also getting from parishes information on a regular basis on newly registered interests. Sometimes it takes some weeks to come through, I have to say. But I don't think that's the fault directly of the member, because they often go through the clerk. Although what I've seen, some have gone within 28 days. I'm not going to be rushing in like a police force demanding that they are now be prosecuted for not having disclosed interest within 28 days. They probably did, but they used the vehicle as a club. Bottom line is the onus is on the member to make sure the registration has been duly supplied, but let's be realistic as well. But I've got a sense that people are updating their interests. I also got 1 or 2 cases where people are reluctant to. I've had to give some firm advice that I would suggest you do because it will hurt you later if you don't. And they normally comply. I have had this year, unusually, 2 requests to withhold information because the interests in their view were deemed sensitive. And I have actually agreed to those 2 because they were sensitive, therefore I reveal here what they are. Excuse me. I can only recall 1 such request in the past which was refused. But there is quite a high threshold. There has to be a risk, a genuine risk of injury to the member. It was proven, as far as I was concerned, therefore they have been duly recorded as sensitive. So on the register, for example, if you looked up certain councillors, you would see a notification which says details supplied to the monitoring officer. That's as much as you'll get. When it comes to a complaint, of course, I can still access that information and deal with it. So it's not hidden from scrutiny. Also had some gifts being registered, and they are low value gifts, and frankly in 2 cases they need to be disclosed. But what I like is people who see a fit to notify in case. Because that's a cautionary approach that people are adopting. On gifts and hospitality, I don't mind. These things were a value of around £25 to £50. So nothing of great concern. But that is captured again on the website and publicised. That's what was received. Dispensations, this is similar to previous years. I've had requests for dispensations, only 2, but that's in respect of a company that's been established by the council in the event. There's no particular interest of, peculiar interest of the company directors, but because they've obviously got to act as per the company's wishes, there could be a potential benefit for them, if you like, in terms of their reputation, whatever language we want to use, there could be some potential benefit. So the best advice they've had is to request dispensations, which they've done, and they will be granted. And again, entered in the website, etc. Interestingly, on dispensations, we did find out about a case in the parish council where a plan application was being considered. There was the plan application of 2 of the councillors, but because they were able to convince themselves and others that they were acting in the best interests of the parish, they were allowed to stay and take part. I'm sorry, that was not appropriate. They'd been given a dispensation to do so, and I would not have given such a dispensation. Just a classic case of, you may well say, you may well believe, Joe Public will not believe that you are able to act fairly, shall we say. However, the jurisdiction is with the parish council and the town council. I can't do that much better apart from advice. I do know the parish clerk has taken on board the advice, so the report will work. Complaints then, over the year 2014-15, so we're talking June to June, essentially. 19 complaints were submitted and have given some and been assessed, although 1 is actually awaiting the write-up of the assessment, which is what's reported in that paragraph, without the write-up bit. Most were dealt with as no further action, because quite frankly, they weren't worth pursuing. 2 recently have been referred for a formal investigation. Now, new independent persons, well, all of our independent persons for that matter, have been assigned roles by myself for those cases. They are a combined investigation. There's 2 cases, but a combined investigation. And they've got their respective roles. And once again, I will say to the committee that having multiple independent persons is helpful. I think it ensures absolute clarity of roles in the complaint process. No question of whether you favour that person more than me, because you're supporting both type of thing. The monitoring officer of the subject matter. 4 complaints were actually about DDC members and 15 about parish council members. Normally we have less for district council members, to be honest. I think all the district ones were about planning matter. If I could sum it up, was essentially didn't like the decision that the plan committee made and took issue with some of the contributions made and perhaps the style of the contributions. But one of the things I like to do, and I've done it in the parish as well, is sometimes it's a useful device for me in the decision notice to just give some sort of background as to what is the practice of local government. I say about the code of conduct, so how meetings are held, how they actually operate. And sometimes, for example, members do talk to each other. Sometimes they might be comparing people. And that's not a rude signal, it's not a disrespect signal. It's a case of necessary. Did you think, or what do you think? Shall we ask, or whatever it might be? So, sometimes I use the opportunity to try and help people understand how it works. Limited number of complaints is good, as I say. What we need to be aware of, obviously the Dorset case being an example, is that there is a role for the Director of Prosecutions, and you'd like to think we have something in place with the police in particular, and they start to do the investigations on behalf of the TPP, as to a protocol being in place. And I have come to this committee, I think, the last 2 times to say we're looking at doing a county-wide protocol. That didn't get very far with the police. I then decided I'll have the Daventry district version, and I'll try and take the lead and push on with that. I've had engagement with the police on that, and that's not got anywhere. I've pursued the same thing again this year. I have had a comforting email back from the police to say we still want to do it. I haven't seen it. I'm not holding my breath. But if I get it, it will be an improvement. It's not essential, but it will be an improvement. It will just give clarity to people in case we've got a big case. I think it would help. But to date, I haven't had it. But my police colleague genuinely wants to do it. He's not got the legal support. The force hasn't physically got the legal support to do it. So it's not necessarily. One of the things we did with the complaint form, and I do like to signpost people to the complaint form because it helps, but it's not essential. That's what I like to signpost. We did ask newly this year for their proposed remedies. I know some of the authorities have been doing that before. That's been quite useful. You can get a sense whether people want to accept an apology, and often they don't. And they often want members to be banned from office, which can happen. So it's quite useful again to inform people as to what can and cannot be done. And sometimes when you've got, there are complainants out there who can be somewhat serial complainants. And if you give an indication of one complainant, these are the rules now, it might actually prevent some complaints coming forward which frankly have got no chance of getting anywhere or achieve what they want. Because I genuinely want to have members empowered at all levels to do what they're obliged to do within, yes, a controlled framework, but not thwarted by it, is it? It's about trying to allow them to express without coming getting foul of the processes in place, the code that's in place. The remedy question has been useful. On top of page 18, I talk about the topics that have come through on those complaints. I've got a separate schedule which we'll just touch on later. Bias, non-disclosure of interest, bullying, treating others with respect, disrepute. Those are the common things that are used, and the complaints are often multiple in that way. You'll see the headings later, they're multiple in that way. And I've given you why I haven't taken further action. Lack of evidence, as in lack of evidence forthcoming, not just what is submitted, but what could be expected. What they've suggested is a breach of the code. No, it's not likely to be a breach of the code. And one of the things we can use these days, which is good for the taxpayers generally to know, is that we don't waste public money on things that haven't got much chance or are not worth pursuing because they're not of vital interest. That is something that is fairly new to the standards approach. And I think that's a fair one for the other taxpayers. Because as I say, some people can be vexatious. And it does cost money to actually investigate complaints. In the decision notice, as well as informing people about what happens in local government meetings, for example, I like to give them the reasoning for decisions. You don't have to. just issue a decision notice. I actually think it's fair to all parties to know what the reasoning was. I try to do that. And if need be, for independent persons, if I've had to engage independent persons, for example, on an informal resolution idea, which we haven't in the last year, bar in one case, if there was a difference between us, I would also record that in the decision notice, because I think again it's fair to show there's been a thrashing around of the subject. There has been a general case nationally handled by the Information Commissioner's Office related to what could be disclosed to a member of the public who is interested in the complaint and what the council had said in response to the complaint. But the Information Commissioner said because that case resulted in no further action, it was not fair to release that information into the public domain. Because the member would then be potentially standing there, no smoke without fire accused, etc. When it's been decided there's no further action, it would be unfair to reveal more about his particular contributions to that case. Taking that as a cue, we've emphasised the confidentiality therefore of what we issue, and it's put on now a watermark, confidential, slapped across it, to make it absolutely clear. What I did last year, I forget which month it was, but I supplied redacted copies of all the decision notices at that time to the members committee. And they were redacted because I don't want members to get the impression of, oh, that parish council again, or that parish council again, or that district council again. So that's why it's redacted, is to give you that sense of what's the general themes out there, what's the general sort of complaint that's been made, what's the people's style, what do they use as evidence, etc. So things like tweeting features nowadays whereas it never used to. So tweeting what people say on Twitter becomes quite a feature of complaints. And I would suggest that continues again. I think that's worked for members and for the persons. They also get some decision notices as well. I did have 2 cases going off to Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman wasn't interested, frankly. You've got your own complaint arrangements in place, you followed those, there's no right of appeal in your complaint arrangements, it was supposed to be the independent party anyway, fine. So I don't know whether authorities have had Ombudsman cases or not on this subject, but we've had 2 be dismissed, so I do not expect the Ombudsman to get involved, and it's certainly not what the national regime expected. I've highlighted that the most dissatisfying aspect for complainants is the lack of sanctions that we can apply, and for parish councils, the reliance on parish councils to invoke sanctions that we would recommend if we did so. But reputation, we've already mentioned, that is the biggest, I think, the biggest sanction that can hit any council. In terms of the hearing panels, so we're on page 19, in terms of the hearing panels, because we haven't had any, we obviously can't learn from any experience this year, but things worked reasonably well before, don't see need to change that. Nothing's happened nationally to suggest that. Independent persons, the 2 new persons we've already introduced before the meeting, and I set a reminder of the role of the independent person, because we have a variation of the role of the independent person, hence we have 3. But again, Andrew Foster will particularly vouch for a quiet year, such that when we interviewed the independent person, we said we're not expected to get much. And obviously in June we've got 2 cases where they've been engaged, so hopefully there won't be a trend, but if it is, they're ready to act. So we have those 2 cases of investigation where they were determined. One of the things that was suggested by independent persons last year has proved useful is the frequently asked questions note. And if we get ever a need to add to that, I've asked the independent persons, particularly Andrew Foster, to supply things that he thinks would be relevant to add to that. But the new independent persons can also do the same. So that has been useful for the general persons. That is again published on the website for general persons. And independent persons, through the word independent, they have been meeting amongst themselves with a facilitator. They met county-wide, met in November last year, and they're going to meet again as they see necessary, and it's quite good to try and exchange ideas as to what's happening across the county. I think I can say fairly, so the feedback I've had on some of the national events is we have encouraged members to go on the national events. These benefits from that have been more limited, if you like, as time's gone. But again, if something came up and they wanted to go, as a council, we're quite happy with that. Wider knowledge gathering is useful. One of the other ideas from independent persons previously is about an annual newsletter to parish and town councils. I sent one round. It's only a one-pager, and I believe that was well received from parishes, particularly. And again, I'm recommending that. It seems to work. You'll see the topics I've identified previously, and that's the sort of things that we included in these. That newsletter and anything else, 50 things is particularly relevant to include. So, no implications as such on the financial or legal range in particular, or other categories, crime, disorder, etc. The policy point is about the minor adjustment to go to council. If I was to try and conclude, which I've set out here, it's generally been positive in 14-15. We had some reinforcement necessary of what's expected, particularly at the parish level. And so learning development sessions still can be relevant, both by us and by the NCAP. Still to engage in NCAP. Complaints are kind of similar. Sanctions, limitation, yes. I do explain to complainants what we can and cannot do sometimes. But reputation is needs to be on card. Complaint handling, one of the things I haven't mentioned is being able to be prompt more than previous strategy. And I think all benefit from that. Nobody wants to have a complaint hanging over them. Nobody wants to have a complaint that go logged. And they think they complained 6 weeks ago, they want a decision. Why is it going on? So I think that's been a positive. Obviously, if it goes to investigation, it then goes on potentially to a hearing. Hearing can also be a long process. But that's still quicker than before. And the independent persons has worked well previously. I've got every confidence that deployment will work positively again. So I've gone through the main issues that I've seen over the year. The advice picks up on those points. I won't read out the advice to channel, but it picks up on those points. And there's that recommendation to the council about conduct. So a bit of a run through.
John, do you have any questions or anything that you would like to ask of the management officer before we classify that?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned unlimited sanctions. I'm curious on that. Is that a national issue or is it just a local issue? Is there something we can do about it? Or
nationally, in the original bill and the like, the Guernsey Act, there wasn't any reference to the types of sanctions that could be deployed. Because of that, management officers and others around were thinking, well, what do we do then? You do, you breach the code of conduct, then what? Yeah. And what happened was that various groups got together, management officers and societies, clerks, etc., got together and got a council's opinion. Tying standards law, if you like, with other law related to local government and what councils can do, respective membership committees and the like, political groups can do, etc. There was a suite of suggestions from council which was essentially over time accepted by government as what can be done. But fundamentally, it did not allow, which is the one I've highlighted in the report, fundamentally does not allow for suspension of a council by the likes of Stansted. Only the court can do that. So when something of a disclosable human interest breach has gone through the court by the police and direct public prosecutions, that potentially can have the consequence of disqualification from office. But that is an unusual process. That Dorset case was unusual. I think the police, it's fair to say the police have got bigger issues to worry about. So there wasn't anything set nationally. As a sector, they identified options. We incorporated those in our complaint arrangements. Do I think there'll be any change nationally? Absolutely. I I think it's something, as far as the government's concerned, is that's it, man. We're not going to change anything for a few years.
Any other comments?
Can I just make a comment? Can I thank you for a more comprehensive report? I think you covered all the items here, and it was easy to read and well done. Thank you for that. The one thing that I did notice is that the comments made on the police protocol in 2015 sound remarkably like the comments that were made on the police protocol in 2014. And I noticed that nothing is either resolved or recommended to move this forward. Is that something that we ought to be giving some concern to or not? And are we dealing with a senior enough officer, for example?
I am dealing with a senior enough officer, a chap who covers the Midlands. Thanks to our officer. I think what would help me this time is to have a committee express concern. Not in an aggressive way. It's just a desire to make it clear for all users of the standard system what happens in certain cases. In respect to peculiar interests, there is a particular role for the Director of Public Prosecution. So, if the committee wished to add to the recommendations, for example, that it calls for a police protocol to be brought into effect as soon as possible and urges the police to so do, in consultation with bodies, obviously, I would be happy with that. It would help me.
I think perhaps if we don't do that, we may well have a very similar comment in 2016.
Yeah. So from the point of view, Steve, is that a recommendation?
I don't think I'm allowed to make recommendations. As an independent person, I think they have to come from councillors.
Well, I'll be happy to make that recommendation on your behalf. If you let us more to do, I would be interested.
Yes.
I can see great recommendation.
In that case, that recommendation is there. Now, I intend to read the resolved matters and the recommendations just as a matter of course anyway. So, is there anything further? In that case, gentlemen, we have five resolved items, 5 items that require resolution. They are: 1. The annual review of standards of conduct and the handling of complaints is noted as a generally positive record. 2. Occasional use of members of the committee as mystery shoppers continues. 3. Northamptonshire County Association of Local Councils is invited to arrange learning and development sessions, particularly on disclosable interests and on dispensations for parish and town members and clerks. 4. The monitoring officer arranges a learning and development session, particularly on disclosable interests and on predisposition and predetermination for all DDC members. 5. The 2014-15 summary of key messages is supplied by the monitoring officer to parish and town councils based on experience of the past year. Do we agree with that advice?
We've got the 6th version, we'll do the others.
Those are the resolved items. We now have 2 recommended items. The first, which is item 6, the DDC Local Code of Conduct for members, July 2015, is adopted. And the newly added one, which will be 7. Can you repeat it, please?
Calls for the police protocol as soon as possible in liaison with the monitoring officer.
You wish, Chairman, just before you conclude on that, you can either take it as a recommendation to council if you want to heighten the profile.
I would prefer to.
Otherwise, you can resolve it.
I would prefer to take it full council. So, from that point of view, do we accept the recommendation? So, okay, so that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, item 5, record of complaints and record of Daventry District Council dispensations. Thank you, Simon.
I won't dwell on this because the messages from this have been recorded, if you like, taken through into that report just been through and down. But it just gives more flesh on the bones. We've had decision notices, as I say, in the past anyway. But for public consumption purposes, of course, this is quite useful for people to see what's coming our way during the course of the year. And they can see the types of issues that come up. But I do think one of the messages that will come through is to get something taken forward, you really want to have some like, not genuinely held, genuinely concerning complaints. because at the end of the day, some of the stuff that I see is spat, which frankly isn't going to be assisted by this process. And sometimes I've had to put messages back about it's about parish council deciding how it wishes to operate as a body. So when we've got that reference previously about an angry affair, that's the sort of parish council meeting you don't really want to have. To try and address it like that. I'm trying to indicate decision notices the severity, if you like, of what's been put to them. And you can see from here that they're not that severe. I don't. That's not unusual. I know from launching officers' meetings we have across the county, that is a common position. What's different, I think, is I tend to write them up more than others do. But I think that's only fair. But I've tried to give you details about the nature of the complaint, who against, decision, which is straightforward, and then some commentary. And that's where I picked up some of the other messages. So guidance about parish council's future practice or procedures. So that just kind of captures it. And I know clerks look at this information. And they'll look to try and identify their council. And then they'll look down the comments column anyway to see if they pick up things and they think, oh, that's interesting. Oh, no. And again, there's a subliminal message being able to give them across the parish council, not just the ones directly having decision notice. So it's useful for that purpose as well. But that essentially is what we've done in the past, a record of complaints received, where they've got to, so you see that one is awaiting assessment, as I referred to earlier. Those have been resolved, those are waiting decision because they've got to investigation. I've captured also dispensations previously agreed to do. We don't need to do any of this, but for public consumption it seems a better format.
So also gives clarity as to everything we do. It's
Transparency. And for your benefit, so you don't have to bring 19 decision notices with you, whatever. The narrative I put in the main report, it's got some detail on the schedule, so it's useful because as the what it is to do. But that's all I need to say, Richard.
Thank you.
There's no resolution.
Moving on therefore to item 6. Any other business? No item done. So, gentlemen, I thank you for attending. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for acting as clerk. And at 7:02, I will close the meeting.